Did you know that worrying about performance anxiety can just make things worse? That doesn't sound like a particularly helpful thing for me to tell you, does it? But don't worry. In this video, I'll show you why you don't need to worry so much about performance anxiety, and I'll show you how you can use that knowledge to dial that anxiety down a few notches. Now, I'd love to be able to promise that I can make that anxiety just disappear completely, but that's not realistic. Anyway, let's get into it. In order to help you dial down your performance anxiety, we first need to understand a little bit about what's going on. Now, performance anxiety is a perfectly normal evolutionary response to our perception of a threatening situation. So why does it seem that some people get much more affected by it than others do? Now, research shows that both anxious and non-anxious people experience pretty much the same physiological responses in these situations. So raised heart rate, sweaty palms, shaking limbs, that sort of thing. What seems to be different is their perception of what this means and how much they actually notice this. So anxious people had pretty much the same external measurements for these symptoms of anxiety, physical symptoms of anxiety, as everyone else. What was different was that they felt them more than non-anxious people did. And they were more worried that this was going to result in negative outcomes. So a large part of the issue is not so much the anxiety itself, it's the concern you feel about the anxiety. And this is why it's really helpful to remember that all these symptoms, all that anxiety is perfectly normal. So what do you do about it? Just worry less about nerves. Easy to say, I know, but much harder to do. Well, I've got two things to help you. First of all, a reason to help convince you that you don't need to worry so much about nerves. And secondly, practical action that you can take that will help you not to think about them so much. And no, neither of these things are going to get rid of your anxiety completely, but they will reduce it. And you'll find that you'll start to get less bothered by the amount of anxiety that remains. Nerves are a lot less noticeable to other people than we think. Have you ever had someone come up to you after they've given a performance or a speech or something like that and said that they felt really nervous doing it, and you replied to them that actually up there on stage they look really confident? This is so common. And if you've noticed it for others, why shouldn't it be true for you as well? Simple, it is. Here's my experience of this. The very first time I did a solo guitar gig was at a friend's wedding, and I'd been fine in the run-up to it, but just before I was about to start playing, I got really nervous. I was sitting down and I could feel my legs shaking massively. It was really, really like nothing I'd ever felt before in terms of nerves for that. And I looked down to see just how bad it was, and I was amazed to see that actually they weren't moving at all. It was this really weird feeling. I was getting totally different information from the feeling in my legs of them shaking all over the place, and my eyes telling me there was just no motion whatsoever. Now, once you know this, it shouldn't be so surprising to learn that it's not just the symptoms of nerves that are less than you think, but the effect this has on the outcomes of your performance that's less as well. Going back to this solo guitar gig at this friend's wedding, I felt it went terribly. I could feel all this shaking. I just wasn't able to play the way that I thought I could, knew I could. And I literally went up to some of my friends afterwards and asked them if I'd been so bad that I'd ruined the whole thing. And they actually turned around and told me no, it was an absolutely brilliant performance. So my perception of how it had gone was so coloured by this feeling of being clumsy, by all the shaking and stuff like that, that I just hadn't been able to accept that actually it really hadn't knocked my performance down much, a notch at all. So the outcome was actually still totally fine. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that those physical symptoms, those shaky limbs, all that sort of stuff that feels so bad, it doesn't mean that this has no effect on your performance at all, but it's much, much less than you'd think. Okay, so that's the reason why you don't logically need to be so worried about your symptoms of anxiety. But what's the practical steps that you're going to take? And the trick is to work on having something specific to focus on that's going to take your mind off it. Now, this is very simple and straightforward, but it does take some preparation and practice. And the aim here, of course, is the idea that It's really hard to say to yourself, right, I'm not going to think about what's going on, all these anxious things. Much easier instead to say, here's something different that I am going to think about. Now this is where you need to be prepared ahead of time. You don't want to be thinking in the heat of the moment, right, now what am I going to choose to focus on? You want to have chosen that in advance. And in fact, you may well even find that once you get into the heat of the moment, you forget that you're meant to have something specific to focus on. So make sure you choose what it's going to be ahead of time. The second part of the puzzle is being able to keep your focus there where you want it, even when there are other things competing for your attention. Now this is where you need to have done some practice. It gets easier and more effective the more you work on it. Now it's beyond the scope of this video to go into that, but I'll put some links in the description below that will help you with that. Now, on top of the very nice thing of not worrying so much about those symptoms of anxiety, if you can take your attention off them, then there are other benefits to your performance as well. It gives you more brain power to put into actually doing the difficult motions that are going to give you your best performance. You won't be wasting some of your cognitive resources thinking about other stuff, what's happening with the anxiety. And in particular, one thing that's known to be unhelpful for performance is closely monitoring our muscle movements. And when you're worrying about those symptoms of anxiety, those shaky limbs, that sort of thing, you're doing exactly that. So you can take your mind off it and you'll play smoother, freer, think about the big picture, better playing. So that's it. If you'd like to learn about another attitude that can help you reduce nerves, then check out my video on the warrior mindset next. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe to the Play in the Zone YouTube channel right now. Just click on the subscribe button below this video. And if you know a musician out there who needs to hear this information, then please share it with them. Also, if you want my practice and performance tips that I only share with subscribers, then head over to playinthezone.com and sign up for the emails. They're free. And now it's your turn. Where are you going to practice focusing your attention rather than being aware of your anxiety? Let me know by leaving a comment below right now. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.